Loneliness, according to a lot of studies, is as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's incredible, isn't it? You think about the amount of money and investment that goes into health campaigns about smoking, rightfully so. We put graphic warnings on cigarette packets. We ban smoking in workplaces and public spaces. And yet loneliness, which, according to the evidence, does fairly equivalent damage to human health and longevity, is something we brush under the carpet, we barely talk about. And this matters a lot because actually the older we get, the more inclined we are towards loneliness. Because retirement, for all of its gifts, gives an increased risk factor when it comes to loneliness. And most retirement planning ignores this entirely. So today I want to talk about that. I want to look at how retirement and the next chapter of our lives creates this loneliness risk, what the research tells us about how devastating it can be, but how you can take positive action towards making your next chapter not only bearable, but absolutely brilliant. That's absolutely possible, but it doesn't happen by accident. Welcome to What Happens Next. Let's talk about the landscape, particularly when it comes to loneliness in the UK. In the UK, about 3.8 million older adults describe themselves as chronically lonely. That's experiencing persistent, unwanted loneliness over an extended period. This isn't about occasional solitude. You know, I've got friends who recover because they take time on their own. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about isolation that people experience in a form of suffering. And the health consequences of this are significant. There's a 26% increased risk of mortality from loneliness, higher rates of heart disease, significantly elevated risk of depression and anxiety, accelerated cognitive decline, and a weakened immune system. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest study of this type in the world, 85 years of longitudinal data, found that the quality and warmth of our relationships are the greatest predictor of both health and happiness in later life. Effectively, and if you've not read the book, I'd recommend you get it. It's called The Good Life by Robert Waldinger. He encapsulates this entire thing in one phrase. The quality of our relationships determine the quality of our lives. Not wealth, not status, not even physical health, relationships. Now, clearly wealth, physical health, and all of those other well-being factors play a part, but the one that's least talked about might be the one that's most important: maintaining positive social connections. And yet, all the evidence points to the fact that the networks of most people begin to get smaller after the age of 55, accelerating sharply around retirement, and continue to reduce in our 60s, 70s and beyond. But this stuff isn't inevitable. It might be the norm. The question is, are we going to let it be your norm? I think to consider the problem, we need to understand a little bit about what's causing it. So let me walk you through the things that cause social disconnection later in life. Firstly, the workplace was often the engine of a lot of our social worlds. It provided automatic, regular, high-frequency contact with a bunch of people. Some you'd like, some not so much, but it gave you that contact. You didn't have to plan it, you didn't have to organise it, you just showed up and the conversations happened. Colleagues, team members, clients, suppliers, coffee conversations, water cooler conversations if you've got a water cooler in your place, the hallway catch-ups and the after-work drinks. When work ends, the entire social structure associated with work often disappears overnight. And in my 20 plus years as a financial planner, my experience is that when people do stop or go into their what happens next chapter, the social side of work is often an underestimated element of people's lives. Reason number 2 is because the opportunities for higher frequency contact tend to reduce naturally. All the research says that when it comes to friendships, frequency is really important, and the consistency of that frequency is vital. People you see regularly stay close. People you see less often become acquaintances instead of friends. In retirement, the opportunities for that regular incidental contact reduce sharply. And unless you're proactively creating new structures for high frequency connection, the relationships you've had through work will naturally fade. This isn't anyone's fault. It's just how relationships work without the structure that work provides. And reason number 3 is our identity shift often affects our social confidence. We talked in a previous video about the identity shift that going into the next chapter of our life often triggers. But it's worth thinking about the social dimension of that shift specifically. When your identity, and let's be honest, probably some of all of our egos are tied to our professional role, when you know who you are, when you know what you do, and when you contribute, social situations feel more navigable. You have a context, a story, a reason to be in the room. Often without that professional anchor, some people find that their social confidence can, not in all occasions, but can reduce. They feel less sure how to introduce themselves, less clear on what they have to offer, less willing to put themselves out there. The result, not inevitably, but on occasion, can mean that there's a retreat from social situations. I talk a lot on the What Happens Next YouTube channel about the conversation I had with somebody I know many years ago who wanted to go into the next chapter of his life and delayed it. And when we got to the bottom of the reason why, he just turned to me and said, and he was a managing director of a construction business, who am I if I'm not that? And the interesting thing about that is when we move into the next chapter of our lives, often, if we're not that, it can impact our social confidence. But there are solutions to overcome that. So, the key factor is if we're thinking about the next chapter of our lives, what can we do to actually maintain high levels of social well-being? Here's the things that I've seen through my clients, through the research I've done on the What Happens Next project, and through the reading I've done that I am confident will work. Firstly, show up consistently. Connection doesn't come from a one-off acquaintance. It comes from regularity. Join a walking group that meets every Tuesday. As you know, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, I play paddle a few times a week, and I love that, not only for the physical well-being it gives me, but also for the positive social connections I get to build. If you're turning up once and making social connections, those social connections won't be deep. You're just a visitor. But defining something you love and turning up really consistently is a way to maintain positive social connections. Commit to regular, repeated presence somewhere, anywhere, wherever you feel happy. The specific context of that group matters less than the consistency. Strategy 2 is join things with a purpose, not just people. One of the most consistently effective strategies for building social connection is to hang around with people who want to have a positive impact in the world, groups effectively organised around a shared activity or interest rather than just meeting people. A choir, a sports team, a book club, a walking group, a volunteering project that combines that social well-being with community well-being. The activity you bond over gives you a shared focus and a natural context for connection. And what tends to happen in those environments is friendships emerge as a byproduct. For most people, this is way more natural and effective than just turning up for a social event designed purely for meeting people. Strategy 3, this is something I definitely use in my life. Be the connector. The people in any community who are consistently well connected are the ones who connect others. You know, when you meet somebody, you go, actually, you'd really benefit from meeting this person. Not from a commercial perspective and a business perspective, although that can work too. But if you think two people are going to get on, why not introduce them? Say, would you like to join my paddle WhatsApp group? Being the connector is free to do and is there for anyone who's willing to take it. It's got a remarkable multiplier effect. If you're the person who's always at the centre of that web of connection and building those social well-being, not only for you but for others. And strategy 4, and it's one I think a lot about when I think about my children and the way they connect, is using digital tools as a bridge, not a destination. Online communities, including what we're building with What Happens Next, can be genuinely valuable. They provide access, shared experience, information, and low-stakes connection. But digital is a bridge. It doesn't replace that visceral in-person connection. The warmth, the body language, and non-verbal elements you get from meeting people. If you're into this sort of thing, and I am, a hug, a touch, the physicality of that face-to-face connection. The research on this is consistent. Digital connection doesn't replace face-to-face. Use digital to supplement your social life. Don't allow it to be a convenient substitute for building one. So I'd like you to do one thing for me this week, just one. Think of one person that you've been meaning to reach out to and reach out to them today. Not by a like on their social media post, an actual invitation to meet or a phone call. That's even better. Because the research is clear. The quality of your relationships is the greatest determinant of the quality of your life. Not your pension, not your health metrics, your relationships. You can have the most perfect financial plan in the world, and that's important. But if you're doing it on your own, in isolation, you're losing out on something fundamental. Drop in the comments what one action you're going to do this week. I'd love to know. Or what connection you've already made, what group you've joined, what community you're part of that's made a positive impact to your retirement. And let's share this with each other. And if you want to be part of the What Happens Next community, see what we're up to, feel free to do that. Just simply visit whathappensnext.life, and there's a bunch of different ways you can get involved. Until next time, have a lovely day, and we'll see you on the channel soon.